Okay, so we all kind of know that fairy tale, right?
Yeah.
The one about relationships just sailing smoothly, no disagreements ever.
Yeah, that one. Which, let's be honest, is pretty much a myth.
Totally. And what's really interesting, maybe even a bit counterintuitive, is that sometimes those super calm, fight-free relationships,
Yeah.
they might actually be hiding stuff, unspoken things,
Exactly. Which is why today we're doing a deep dive into relationship conflict.
but not in a scary way, more like getting under the hood, figuring out how to handle those inevitable bumps in the road, like learn how to navigate them better.
Precisely. We're digging into this really comprehensive article from Self Sensei. It's called Understanding and Navigating Conflict in Relationships.
Okay.
And what's great about this source is it pulls from so many different areas, understanding ourselves, our emotions, human behavior, even like the psychology of learning.
Wow. Okay.
And it applies all of that to this core idea of conflict in our connections.
Right. That sounds like a pretty wide scope. So for you listening, what's the main goal here? What should you really get out of this deep dive?
Well, our mission basically is to boil down the key insights from this article. Give you a bit of a shortcut maybe to understanding what's actually going on when disagreements happen.
And more than just understanding.
Oh, definitely.
Hmm.
More importantly, we want to give you some practical tools, things you can actually use. Think of it like building your conflict competence.
Conflict competence. I
Yeah,
like that.
it's that ability to deal with those clashes, those arguments in a way that actually makes your relationship stronger, not weaker.
Okay. And you mentioned something fascinating right at the start, this idea that maybe not having conflict isn't always the best sign. Can you unpack that a bit?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? We usually see conflict as bad, but sometimes a total lack of it. It might point to, well, significant emotional distance.
Like people aren't really engaged.
Exactly. Or maybe one person is just constantly suppressing their own needs, their own views, just to keep the peace.
Right. Avoiding rocking the boat.
In truly connected relationships, differences are just bound to pop up. Needs, goals, they won't always align perfectly. So if there's no conflict, it might mean those differences are being pushed down. That surface piece could be costing authentic connection.
Hmm. That's a really important point to start with. Okay, so let's get down to the nitty-gritty. How does our source actually define interpersonal conflict? What is it?
Well, the article synthesizes it nicely. It defines it as an expressed struggle or disagreement.
Expressed. So not just internal frustration.
Right, it's shown between at least two interdependent parties who perceive incompatible goals, scarce resources, and/or interference from others in achieving their goals. It even mentions Hawker and Wilmot's work, emphasizing it's something we communicate.
Through words, tone, maybe even just a look.
Absolutely. It's what happens when our needs or desires clash with someone we're linked to, and we show it.
Okay, that definition has a few key parts. Let's break them down. First, interdependent parties. Why is that interdependence so important?
It's fundamental, really. Conflict happens in relationships where our lives are tangled up, where we depend on each other somehow.
Like in a marriage, deciding on finances or where to live.
Exactly. The article uses that example. Your choices affect your partner, their choices affect you, there's a ripple effect.
So the closeness itself creates potential friction points.
Precisely. It's not that close relationships are bad, just that the more intertwined you are, the more chances there are for needs or goals to, well, rub up against each other.
Okay, that makes sense. Next up, incompatible goals. Does this mean like huge fundamental clashes every time?
Not necessarily, and this is key. The article stresses it's about perceived incompatibility.
Perceived. So how we see it.
Exactly. Not always objective reality. Think about that example. One person saving for a house, the other wants to travel now.
Right.
Objectively, both are fine goals, but the presumption might be we can't do both, or your goal stops mine. It's the belief they're incompatible right now.
Got it. It's that feeling of being pulled apart. Then, scarce resources, money, time, seems straightforward.
Yes, but it goes deeper than just the tangible stuff. The article points out it can also be intangible things,
Right.
like affection, attention, respect, maybe even power within the relationship, that underlying feeling, that belief that there just isn't enough of something to go around that can really fuel a conflict.
Ah, so scarcity isn't just about the bank account. It can be about feeling unseen or unheard.
Exactly right. Feeling like you're not getting your fair share of attention or respect.
And the last bit of the definition, interference from others in achieving their goals. What's that about?
Interference is basically feeling like the other person is blocking you, getting in the way of what you want or need.
Intentionally. Or,
It could be intentional, sure, but often it's unintentional, like maybe someone's long work hours interfere with family time, even if they don't mean them to. The core thing is the perception of being hindered.
so it keeps coming back to perception, how we interpret things.
It really does. The article drives this home. Conflict is shaped so much by our subjective take, not just objective facts.
So two people could have different goals, but no conflict if they don't see it as a problem.
Precisely. If they don't perceive the goals as incompatible or they don't feel the other person is interfering, the conflict might not ignite. Which, by the way, hints at a way to manage conflict, helping people reframe how they're seeing the situation.
Interesting. Okay, so we're getting a clear picture of what conflict is, but like, are there different kinds? A fight about the remote feels different than a fight about core values.
Absolutely. And the article points out a couple of really helpful distinctions. First, there's pseudo-conflict.
Pseudo, like fake conflict.
Sort of. It's conflict that basically springs from a misunderstanding, a miscommunication. Once you clear that up, the conflict often just evaporates.
Like crossed wires. Can you give an example?
The article uses badgering. Maybe someone's just playfully teasing, But the other person takes it as hostile criticism.
Ouch.
Yeah. But if they clarify, like, hey, were you just joking? Oh, yeah, totally. Then, poof, conflict gone. Seeking clarification is key there.
Okay, makes sense. What's the other main distinction?
The other big one is differentiating between content conflict and relational conflict.
Content versus relational. Okay.
Content conflict is about the specific thing you're disagreeing on. The facts, the task, the what, like who takes out the trash or the details in a report.
Right. The surface issue.
Exactly. Relational conflict, though, is deeper. It's about the relationship itself. Power dynamics, respect, control, connection, trust. It's about us, not just the it.
So how do you know if it's shifted from content to relational? That seems tricky.
A big clue the article mentions is when you talk starts creeping in.
You talk.
Yeah, blaming language. You always do this. You are so inconsiderate. When it shifts from the issue to attacking the person's character, that's often a sign you're in relational territory.
Gotcha. And I guess many fights have bits of both.
Very often, yes. And those simmering, unresolved relational issues, they can constantly fuel arguments about content. You might be fighting about the dishes again.
But really, it's about feeling unappreciated.
Exactly. That underlying feeling of being taken for granted or not supported, it's a crucial link to understand.
Okay, this is really helpful. We know what conflict is, the different types. Now let's dig into the why. What are the common triggers? Where does this discord usually come from?
Right. The article breaks this down nicely. It talks about universal triggers, things that can spark conflict in pretty much any relationship.
Okay.
And then it looks at triggers that are maybe more specific to certain contexts, like romantic partners or families or friends.
Let's start universal. What's high on that list?
Differences in communication styles. Huge one. We all learn to communicate differently based on, our background, culture, experiences.
Like direct versus indirect.
Exactly. Someone direct might seem blunt to an indirect person. The indirect person might seem vague or evasive to the direct one.
And with texting and email.
Oh, why? Oh, absolutely. Losing those nonverbal cues, tone gets misinterpreted so easily. Major source of misunderstanding and conflict.
Okay, communication styles.
Yeah.
What else is universal?
Conflicting goals and priorities. Pretty straightforward, right? We want different things or we value things differently.
And maybe feeling like my goal is more important.
That definitely makes it worse, yeah. The article points that out. Then there are just, personality differences, how we naturally operate.
Extrovert versus introvert sharing an office.
Classic example. Or an early bird and a night owl living together. Just basic differences in how we're wired or how we approach life can cause friction.
Definitely seen that play out.
What else? Differing values and beliefs. This can be a big one. Fundamental disagreements on ethics, religion, politics.
Things people feel really strongly about.
Exactly. Hard to compromise on core convictions without a lot of mutual respect and understanding. Then there are differing lifestyle preferences.
Like how you spend money. Or free time.
Yeah. Spender versus saver. Planner versus spontaneous person. How you like to socialize, how clean you keep the house. Daily life stuff can add up.
And I bet stress plays a role too. External stuff.
Oh, massively. Stress and external factors are huge universal triggers. Financial pressure, work deadlines, health problems, family emergencies.
Just shortens your fuse, right?
Totally. Lowers your tolerance for frustration. Things that might normally be minor annoyances suddenly feel like major attacks when you're already stressed out.
Makes sense.
And the article makes this really neat connection here, linking many triggers back to that feeling of scarcity we talked about.
Not enough feeling.
Exactly. Not enough money, time, attention, respect. Even conflicting goals can feel like there's a scarcity of ways to meet both needs. Addressing that perception of scarcity can be really powerful.
That's a great insight. Okay, so those are universal. What about specific relationship types, like romantic partners? What triggers pop up there most often?
Well, beyond the universal stuff, communication breakdown is probably #1 for couples. Just not being able to talk openly, honestly, about needs and feelings.
Yeah, that seems foundational.
Trust issues are another huge one. Infidelity, dishonesty, those really cut deep. Financial disagreements are super common too.
The money fights?
Yep. And unmet expectations or emotional needs, feeling unloved, unappreciated, insecure. Also things like dividing chores fairly, intimacy issues, both sexual and emotional closeness, jealousy, insecurity.
Even interference from, like, in-laws.
That definitely makes the list. Balancing your individual life with your shared life. And here's a key point the article makes. Often, those surface fights about chores or money, they might be masking deeper unmet needs, like that feeling of not being appreciated we mentioned.
Right. The argument isn't really about the trash.
Right.
Okay, what about families? What are the unique conflict hotspots there?
Families have their own dynamics, for sure. Differing views and values, especially around long-held traditions, can cause clashes.
Old ways versus new ways.
Often, yeah. Misunderstandings are also common because family communication patterns can be really complex and ingrained over years.
And different life stages must create tension.
Absolutely. Big transitions, new baby, kids becoming teenagers, divorce, moving, job loss. These all shift family roles and expectations and can definitely spark conflict.
Parenting styles too, I bet.
Oh, classic source of conflict between partners or even with grandparents. And of course, sibling rivalry competition for attention, resources, or just personality clashes. Periods of transition, the article notes, often require families to renegotiate how things work, making them prone to conflict.
Makes sense. And friendships. We don't always think about conflict there, but it happens.
It definitely does. And it can be really painful. Jealousy can be a trigger, maybe jealousy over success or other friendships. Poor communication is big too. Misunderstandings, things left unsaid that fester, not really listening. And a lack of respect is crucial in friendships, disrespecting feelings, boundaries, opinions, maybe breaking confidences. That can really break the trust.
Wow, okay. So we've got a good map of the triggers now. I'm really curious about what's going on inside us during these moments, the psychology of it all.
Yeah, this is where it gets really fascinating. The article digs into how our early life, especially our family experiences, shapes how we handle conflict later on.
Like, we learn patterns as kids.
Pretty much. Research suggests that if you experienced, say, really negative conflict behaviors in your family as a teen, like your parents undermining your autonomy, it can actually predict you having more problematic communication in your romantic relationships as an adult.
So if your independence was squashed, you might react differently in arguments later.
Exactly. For instance, that study linked being undermined in adolescence to using more you talk, that blaming language in adult conflicts.
Those you always or you never statements.
Precisely. They immediately put the other person on the defensive, right? And the article stresses how this creates a negative cycle, just escalating things. It's linked to more undermining, even relational aggression. It's like our early environments give us a kind of blueprint for conflict.
Wow. So we might be running old programs without even knowing it.
It can feel that way sometimes, yeah. Self-awareness becomes really key.
So what are some of the main psychological theories that help us understand these conflict dynamics?
The article highlights a few really influential ones. First, you've probably heard of Gottman's 4 Horsemen.
Vaguely. Remind me.
Okay, so John Gottman's research identified 4 communication patterns that are really damaging and predictive of relationship breakdown. They are criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling.
Okay, criticism. Is that just complaining?
It's more than complaining about a specific behavior. It's attacking the person's character, starting with you always or you never. Often signals criticism.
Got it. Contempt sounds worse.
It is. Gottman calls it the most corrosive. It's communicating disgust, superiority. Think sarcasm, cynicism, name-calling, eye-rolling, mockery. It's like saying, I'm better than you. It really erodes respect.
Ouch. Okay. Defensiveness.
That's refusing to take responsibility, making excuses, cross-complaining. Yeah, well, you did this, playing the victim. It's a response to feeling attacked, but it blocks any resolution.
And stonewalling.
That's shutting down. Withdrawing from the conversation, going silent, maybe even physically leaving.
Yeah.
It often happens when someone feels emotionally flooded or overwhelmed. It's a kind of self-preservation, but it kills connection.
Wow. Seeing them laid out like that,
Yeah.
they really do sound like bad news for a relationship.
They are. And the article points out just suppressing them isn't enough. You need to address the roots, maybe eroded trust, unmet needs, past hurts.
Okay. What other theories are helpful?
Emotionally focused therapy, or EFT, developed by Sue Johnson. It's got a really powerful lens.
How does EFT see conflict?
It sees conflict often stemming from unmet attachment needs. Our fundamental need for safety, security, connection, reassurance from our partners.
Like feeling insecure in the bond.
Exactly. When that bond feels threatened, we can fall into these negative cycles. Like one partner becomes critical or demanding, that's often a protest, trying to get a response to reconnect.
And the other partner.
Might withdraw or become defensive, trying to protect themselves from the criticism or the feeling of failure. EFT helps couples see these cycles, understand the underlying fears and needs driving them, and then build more secure, positive ways of connecting.
It makes so much sense. The behavior is driven by this deeper fear of disconnection. Any other perspectives?
The article also mentions Esther Perel's work, which is fascinating. She talks about the tension between intimacy and desire.
How so?
Our need for intimacy often craves safety, predictability, knowingness. But desire, that often thrives on novelty, mystery, separateness.
Ah, the security versus passion dilemma.
Exactly. Conflict can arise from trying to balance these opposing needs, closeness versus autonomy, predictability versus excitement. It sheds light on issues like boredom or differing needs for independence.
Interesting. And does it touch on older psychological ideas too?
Briefly, yeah. It mentions psychodynamic perspectives, like Freud's idea of repetition compulsion.
Which is?
The idea that we might unconsciously repeat patterns from past relationships, especially from childhood and our current ones, like being drawn to similar types of partners or recreating old family dynamics, maybe hoping for a different outcome this time.
But often just repeating the same painful cycle.
If the underlying issues aren't addressed, yeah. It highlights how our past can really echo in our present conflicts.
Understanding all this psychology really shifts the focus, doesn't it? From just who's right or wrong.
Absolutely. It builds empathy. You start seeing the behavior, maybe even your own, as driven by deeper needs or fears. And the article loops back here to language again, how you talk fuels blame, but shifting to I talk.
I feel X when Y happens.
Exactly. Taking ownership of your feelings. That simple shift can start to change those destructive patterns.
This gives such a deeper understanding of the why. So let's talk about the fallout. What happens when conflict isn't resolved well? What are the consequences?
Well, the article is pretty clear. The toll of unresolved or poorly managed conflict is significant. It really hits relationship satisfaction and stability hard.
How?
You see communication just break down further. Maybe those four horsemen become regulars. Trust erodes because of hurtful words, broken promises, things left hanging. You get stuck in these negative cycles where tension just builds and builds.
And intimacy probably suffers.
Hugely. Emotional distance grows. Physical intimacy often decreases. People start feeling lonely, rejected, disconnected, even when they're together.
What about just avoiding conflict altogether? Isn't that better than fighting badly?
You'd think so, maybe, but the article warns against that too. Avoidance has hidden costs.
Like,
Resentment builds up silently. Frustration festers. Trust and intimacy still erode, just maybe more slowly or subtly. You end up with this kind of superficial piece, but underneath there's this growing conflict debt.
so ignoring it doesn't make it go away.
Good.
It just
Yeah.
accumulates interest.
That's a great way to put it. And the impact isn't just on the relationship, it really affects individual well-being, mental and physical health.
How so?
Chronic conflict means chronic stress, more cortisol, more adrenaline. That's linked to increased anxiety, depression.
Makes sense. It's draining.
Totally. It can lower self-esteem too if you internalize all the negativity. People might isolate themselves. And then there are the physical health links.
Like actual physical problems.
Yeah. Research links ongoing relationship conflict to things like cardiovascular issues, digestive problems, even a weaker immune system, headaches, sleep problems, and the ripple effects. Think about children witnessing constant nasty conflict. It's linked to behavioral problems, school difficulties, anxiety for them. For adults, it can lead to unhealthy coping, like substance abuse. It really spreads through your whole life.
That's sobering. The potential damage is huge. But, okay, flip side. Is there a positive side to conflict? Can anything good come out of it?
Yes, absolutely. And this is crucial. When conflict is handled constructively, the outcomes can be incredibly positive.
Like what?
Well, for starters, increased understanding and empathy. When you really listen, share perspectives respectfully, you start to see the world through your partner's eyes a bit more.
So it can actually bring you closer.
Definitely. It can deepen intimacy and strengthen the bond. Going through something tough together and coming out the other side, feeling like a team, that builds trust, a sense of unity.
And you probably get better at solving problems together.
Exactly. You build collaborative problem-solving skills. You learn to brainstorm, focus on solutions that work for both of you. That prevents small things from snowballing later.
What about personal benefits? Does it help us grow?
Big time. The article highlights enhanced self-awareness. You start recognizing your own triggers, assumptions, communication habits. You get better at managing your emotional reactions. That's huge emotional maturity.
And better communication skills overall.
For sure. Expressing yourself clearly, respectfully, listening actively, validating others. These skills are transferable. And ultimately, navigating conflict well helps build resilient, satisfying, long-term relationships.
It reinforces the good stuff.
Yeah, trust, respect, that shared history of we got through this. It prevents resentment from building up because issues get aired healthily. It even helps clarify and reinforce healthy boundaries.
The article calls it a relationship gem.
Yeah, I love that metaphor. Constructive conflict builds relationship, muscles, trust, communication, teamwork, that sense of we-ness. It creates an upward spiral of health. Not a downward one. It's an investment that pays off.
That's a much more hopeful way to look at it. So, okay, we want the relationship gym, not the relationship wrecking ball. How do we actually do that? How do we navigate these storms effectively?
Right, the practical strategies. The article lays out several key areas. First step, understanding your own typical conflict style.
How I usually react.
Exactly. We all have default patterns. The Thomas Kilmann model is really helpful here. It looks at two dimensions. Assertiveness, how much you push for your own concerns, and cooperativeness, how much you focus on the other person's concerns.
Yep.
And based on high-low combinations of those, it identifies 5 main styles: competing, collaborating, compromising, avoiding, and accommodating.
Knowing your default is the first step to maybe choosing differently.
Precisely. Think of your usual style like a familiar path. Is it actually getting you where you want to go in this situation, or are you just walking it out of habit? Recognizing it gives you choice.
Okay, let's quickly run through them. Competing. Sounds like I win, you lose.
Pretty much. High assertiveness, low cooperativeness. Standing your ground, arguing your case, using power. It has its moments, emergencies, maybe unpopular but necessary decisions, but overuse damages relationships.
Collaborating. That sounds better.
It's often seen as the ideal. High assertiveness, high cooperativeness, win-win. Open dialogue, digging deep, finding creative solutions that meet everyone's needs fully.
The catch.
It takes time, energy, trust, and openness. Not always feasible or necessary for every little thing.
Compromising. The middle ground.
Yeah, moderate on both dimensions, win some, lose some. Negotiation, give and take, splitting the difference. Useful for moderately important things, temporary fixes, or when time is tight. But
Nobody's fully happy.
right, it can feel like a sacrifice, and sometimes it avoids tackling the deeper issues needed for a true collaboration.
Avoiding. We touch on this.
Yeah.
Low assertiveness. Low cooperativeness.
Yep. Lose-lose often, because the issue doesn't get addressed. Withdrawing, ignoring, deflecting. Okay, for truly trivial things, or maybe to let tempers cool, but chronic avoidance lets problems fester and signals you don't care.
And accommodating. You win, I lose.
Exactly. Low assertiveness, high cooperativeness. Giving in, putting the other's needs first, can be fine if you realize you're wrong or the issue truly matters more to them or to build goodwill, but as a default, leads to resentment, feeling exploited.
So there are different models too. Gottman's.
Yeah, the article mentions Gottman talks about conflict avoidant, validating, and volatile couples. These are more like overall relationship patterns. Avoidant couples minimize disagreement. Validating couples are calm and collaborative. Volatile couples argue intensely but balance it with lots of affection.
And different styles can work.
Yes, if the overall balance of positive to negative is right, the key skill isn't having one right style, but what the article calls strategic flexibility.
Being able to choose the best approach for the situation.
Exactly. Assessing the conflict, the relationship, the goals, and consciously picking the style that fits instead of just reacting on autopilot.
That sounds like a high-level skill.
Yeah.
Okay, beyond style, what else is crucial for navigating well?
The absolute bedrock is constructive dialogue, really honing those communication skills.
Like active listening?
Definitely. Truly focusing, understanding, not just waiting to talk, paraphrasing, asking clarifying questions. Using I statements is huge too.
I feel, not you did.
Exactly. Feeling behavior impact. I feel frustrated when the bills aren't paid on time because I worry about late fees. It owns your feeling without blaming character. Empathy is vital too, trying to genuinely understand their feelings even if you disagree.
Validating their perspective.
Yeah, showing you get why they feel that way. I can see why you'd be upset about that. Responding non-defensively, huge challenge, but so important. Taking a breath, acknowledging your part if possible, and knowing how and when to take effective breaks.
We keep coming back to breaks when things get hot.
Because it's critical, preventing emotional flooding.
So managing those emotions in the moment. How do we do that? It's hard.
It is hard. Emotional regulation is key. The article suggests practical things. Deep breathing to calm the nervous system. Self-affirmations, labeling your emotion, just naming it, okay, I'm feeling angry, can give you distance. Reframing the situation, trying to see it less negatively. Mindfulness, positive self-talk.
And taking that break effectively. What does that look like?
Recognizing you're overwhelmed, communicating clearly. I'm feeling too upset to talk productively right now. I need a break. Can we come back to this in an hour? Suggesting a reconnect time is important. And then using the break to actually calm down, go for a walk, listen to music, not just stewing and rehearsing your arguments.
Right, productive cooling off. Okay, so we've managed emotions, we're communicating better. How do we actually solve the problem?
This is where collaborative problem solving comes in, shifting from me versus you to us versus the problem.
Trying for that win-win.
Ideally, yeah. Collaboration, or if that's not possible, finding a compromise that feels fair and acceptable to both. The article mentions structured approaches.
Like steps to follow.
Kind of, a general model. Understand the conflict from all sides. Communicate needs openly. Find common ground, brainstorm solutions together, pick one, implement it, check back.
And the Gottman method.
That's a specific one for processing past arguments. It involves expressing feelings without blame, sharing your subjective realities and validating each other's, talking about triggers, taking responsibility for your part, and planning one thing to do differently next time. It emphasizes things like gentle startups to conversations and making repair attempts during conflict.
Sounds very structured. What about boundaries? How do they fit in?
Boundaries are crucial, both for preventing conflict and managing it. They're about knowing and communicating your limits, needs, values, what's acceptable and what's not.
Need self-awareness first.
Definitely. You need to know your limits to set them.
Yeah.
Then communicate them clearly and assertively, not aggressively. Poor boundaries lead to confusion, resentment, feeling walked over, which just fuels more conflict. And respecting others' boundaries is just as vital.
Okay, this is a fantastic toolkit.
Yeah.
But what if you try all this and you're still stuck? Still having the same awful fights? When is it time to get outside help?
That's a really important question. The article stresses that seeking professional help counseling, therapy isn't failure. It's actually a sign of commitment to the relationship's health.
So what are the signs it might be time?
Persistent, recurring conflicts that just go in circles or keep getting worse. Destructive patterns like yelling, name-calling, threats becoming common. A major communication breakdown, you just can't talk constructively, feel constantly misunderstood. Or maybe you recognize those four horsemen showing up all the time.
What else?
A significant drop in intimacy, emotional or physical. Feeling like roommates or like you've fallen out of love. A major breach of trust, like infidelity. Going through big life stressors, job loss, new baby, illness that are straining the relationship. Or if you've honestly tried self-help strategies and you're still stuck. And of course, if separation or divorce is on the table, therapy can help explore that, whether it leads to reconciliation or a more amicable parting.
It's about recognizing you need a different kind of support.
Exactly. Recognizing you're caught in patterns you can't break on your own and could use an objective, skilled guide.
And what can therapy actually do in these situations? What are the benefits?
Professional help offers a lot. Therapists actively teach and help you practice better communication skills. They provide a neutral, safe space where you can talk openly without judgment. They're skilled at identifying those negative cycles and the underlying triggers or unmet needs you might not even see.
So they help you understand the why behind the fights.
Yes, definitely. They guide you in using specific conflict resolution tools and practicing them safely. They can facilitate processes for rebuilding trust and intimacy. A therapist offers an objective perspective, helping you see things differently and build empathy.
And maybe connect current issues to past experiences.
Often, yes. Exploring family of origin stuff, attachment patterns, past traumas if relevant. And it's not just for crisis. Some couples do relationship checkups to proactively strengthen their connection.
Like preventative maintenance.
Exactly. And the skills you learn, they often spill over positively into your other relationships, your work life, your own well-being. It's really an investment in your overall emotional health.
This has been incredibly thorough. Just so much valuable insight here. To kind of wrap things up, what's this single biggest message you want listeners to take away from this deep dive?
I think the core message is that conflict itself isn't the enemy. It's an inevitable part of being connected to others. What matters, what truly defines the health of our relationships, is how we navigate it.
So constructive approaches lead to growth.
Exactly. They lead to growth, deeper understanding, stronger bonds. We've talked about understanding the dynamics, building communication and emotion skills, knowing your style, collaborating on problems, setting boundaries. It's all part of that constructive path.
Okay, so as you're thinking about all this, our final thought for you, our listener, is maybe this. What's just one small, specific shift you could try in how you communicate the next time a disagreement pops up? Just one thing you could experiment with this week.
Remember, learning to handle conflict better is definitely a journey. It takes patience, practice, commitment. But it's a journey that really can lead to more resilient, more authentic, and ultimately more satisfying connections throughout your life.